Okay. So, happy?
Oh, God.
Because my view of happiness, there's a line in Beckett which is something like happiness would be very nice, but not for us. Right?
That's right.
And that's sort of my, in a nutshell, that's my, so for me it's a stretch to think about happiness.
Yeah, I don't, I have to say, like, that makes you very unhappy, like a cell phone. I mean, I don't know, because we're just going to talk, and we're going to talk about things, but I have thought a lot about this, actually, in my life lately, to be honest.
Okay.
And gotten nowhere with it, in a way that meaning that, I'm in my mid-40s or whatever. I just saw this production of Ivanov. I didn't want to see this one with Ethan Hawke. And, oh, was it good. So good. And that play is so much about somebody who's saying, I'm not going to be happy, and I'm going to make you miserable, and I can't seem to get out of this, and and I'm looking at this guy who's kind of my age, who's similar problems, and I was sitting there looking, going, oh God, and realizing I was thinking the same way that this character was thinking, and how it is still a pursuit of happiness. It is still him struggling to try to find a way out, but it just keeps circling back on itself constantly, the same thought, the same idea, the same action, just he can't seem to get out of it. You know? And that's what I've been thinking a lot of lately, that there's a period of time in your life where I kind of look back and I think, was I happy or was I just not aware? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it seems like a very basic question, but I really do think that you reach a time where you pull out of that somehow and go, I don't know. I don't know if I was happy or if I wasn't aware, and now I'm actually going to think about it. Yeah. And it really does upend a lot of things in your own life and in your own mind. And anyway, that was my thinking about happiness. Is like, I don't know what it means to be. I really don't know what that means. I don't think.
Well, the word is a strange word because it's we could just begin by because one way of thinking about happiness is a pleasure, and there's a kind of wish I have for coffee, and I get coffee, and it gives me pleasure. That makes me happy. It's that sort of basic model of happiness. Or you could say the more coffee I get, the happier I get. So a quantitative idea of happiness. Yeah. Or you could go qualitative and say, well, it's not any coffee. I want good coffee.
That's right.
So it's not just a pleasure. It has to be a sort of exquisite pleasure. But that doesn't seem to cover. So one view of happiness is that happiness is pleasure. And the philosophical, as it were, view would produce would be hedonism of a kind. Mm-hmm. We pursue pleasures. But that's not what people are talking about with happiness. There's happiness as a kind of, in terms of philosophy, which is, what I do for a living. I don't know how that.
How did you get away with it?
I don't know. I don't know how that. I really don't know how that got started. You get paid to think. It's amazing.
I love it.
And not think that much. It's just sit there at home, Brooklyn, most of the time, and read books. But but being professorial for a moment, the eudaimonia, Aristotle, the end of the Nicomachean Ethics, which is translated as happiness, but you could translate the Greek as something like blessedness, or something like beatitude was the Latin translation, but it requires the exercise of reason, it requires thought, and it presupposes some kind of virtue. Mm-hmm. So that's a better idea of happiness. So happiness is a kind of virtuous disposition, and Aristotle thought it could produce pleasure. And this was he thought happiness was to enjoy the life of the gods. Aristotle thought that there was this ancient tradition that you find to enjoy the life of the gods. So happiness wouldn't be something, necessarily internal. It would be a relationship to something outside you.
I think that's true. The only time I can think of right now, and I think I feel happy, because I have to say I don't even know what that means, and I know you're starting to define it in a way of like pleasure, pertaining to pleasure. But I would definitely say pleasure is not happiness.
Okay.
Because I think I kill pleasure. Do you know what I mean? Like I take too much of it in and therefore make it unpleasurable. Like too much coffee and you're miserable.
Yeah.
You know, and that I do that to pleasure often. You know, and so I you know, right? And it's like and there is no pleasure that I haven't actually made myself sick on. And so I look at pleasure and I kind of get scared. And I think that in my life now I think I have 3 children and I think I'm happy when I'm with them,
Right.
and they're okay. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that like the you know, and that means a lot this weekend. What's happened in our country recently.
Sure.
And I know people are thinking of that as I said it. That's why I said it, because I was thinking of it. But I'm not bringing that up because of that event. Really, I'm just bringing that up because I realize that something happens in that moment when they're okay, and that's an important thing. Is that when I see them enjoying each other in front of me, and then they let me enjoy them in turn. You know what I mean? So it's me with the children enjoying each other, and then them as a group letting me enjoy them. That brings a feeling which I would say is happiness. Now I don't know why.
Right.
I mean, I do know why, obviously, on the surface, because they're my kids, but it is a certain thing that happens, and I'm like, right now, this is it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to start. I don't need to leave it right here.
But that raises a very interesting issue, which is that, you know, if you're normally asked the question, are you happy? You sort of reflect and you think, well, happiness is something that lies within, right? I don't think that's true. I think if it means anything, happiness lies without. It lies in our relationship to, our very specific relationship to particular people.
Yep.
So in the case you're in relation to your kids, you know, that's love, right?
Yeah.
That's love. And love is not self-love.
No.
Love is love of another.
Right.
So in that sense, you know, happiness would be a consequence of love.
Right.
Right?
But the love is conditional in that sense, though, meaning that I love them unconditionally. I can safely say that. I can say that there's a lot of things that I know that they've already thrown at me and they will continue to throw at me, and I think my love will overcome that to this point. Of course, I can't say how far they'll push it, you know, but I can sit there and say feel strong about it. But I do say in the moment of where they're enjoying each other and they let me enjoy them as much. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, but there are moments when something else creeps in there, and I'm not conscious of the love. I'm conscious of something else, which happens to be my own childhood. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? So all of a sudden they start to reflect something other than what I hoped my childhood to be. Do you know what I mean? So like when they're loving each other and they let me enjoy them, all of a sudden it's almost like they're taking me back, and I'm going, oh God, it's so good to be young and enjoying each other. Do you know what I mean? Like having a kid always takes you back to being a kid somehow, and they really are showing me a childhood I might not have had in some way.
Right.
And I think that's what happens. Does that feel good to go back like that? And it feels good, meaning it does feel. So it is love, but it's also something else. I mean, love encompasses all those things I'm talking about. But if something else creeps in with the children, it becomes a different kind of reflection, which is of your shortcomings, your inadequacies, you know, your incapabilities, your powerlessness, and on and on and on, which wakens up a whole other thing. And that's what I mean about happiness. Does that mean it ended?
Right.
And that gets so discouraging to me. About, well, what is this thing? How does it become? Because Simon had said about unconditional and the happiness. I think something about how does happiness become unconditional? I guess when I heard that, I'm like, that would be a huge question of mine.
Yeah, I don't know. But let's think. But it brings to mind. Well, I was watching. I mean, Magnolia for the 168th time.
I'll tell Paul.
It's when there's the line from that film, well, it's repeated, as the man says, you might be through with the past, but the past isn't through with you. Right? There's one line we need to remember, it's that the past is that thing that if you think you're through with the past is going to sneak up and destroy you, destroy whatever pleasure you might like to think you're having, which is then bound up with the family, say in that movie, right?
Right.
We have a litany of abuse, of weirdness, of incest, of all of that, which then makes that being happy with your kids and then reflecting on your past. There's all of that to consider, right?
Yeah.
But that would be unpleasant. Yeah, and that's the narrative that that's the basic narrative of like Greek tragedy. Right?
Yeah,
Here's someone that, like Oedipus, who thinks he's happy, solves riddles, he's king, he's got a beautiful wife and kids, and then the past undoes him.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. Actually.
Right, right.
I think what you're saying, I'm sure as I was saying that how do you do you keep your past in your present all the time then? Because I think what Paul says what Paul puts there in the film, is, and he also talks about regret in that passage. Regret, and he also says something that I love, and I think is only ever said in that movie, is that life is not short, it's long.
Yeah.
You know, people always say life is short. That's kind of the phrase. Life is short, time is short. And it does. As we get older, time does quicken, you know. But he says, and it's so right, it's long. And it's long pertaining to that thought. Yeah. That the past is not done with you because you can't get rid of it. And so therefore it just starts to drag. Yeah. It does. And it's dragging on that guy. And it's dragging on all the old men in that, which tells you a lot about what he's saying in that story. And his father had just passed recently before he made that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
it's
he
about
was
fathers and sons,
very close with his father. Yeah, you know, and there's a reason why I play the nurse in that and things like that. You know, very close, that whole movie. But I do think that is it. That you get a glimpse of what you might have wanted or what it could have been, and you could start to have it right here in your life now. But then the past does creep in pretty quickly, and that is a very difficult one. And how to keep it there and not have it kind of ruin it.
Because there's that one way of thinking about that would be happiness could be a kind of contentment that I have, right? I feel happy more or less with my coffee and whatnot. And but truth is something else. Truth, the truth about the truth of who one is. Yeah. And maybe you have to make a choice between happiness and truth. And this is, in a way, it's one way of looking at. And a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's films deal with this issue of therapy. Also I want to get onto the master as well, but that question of that's a kind of an uncovering of a questionable truth. But if we go to Oedipus, he's confronted with a truth that undoes him, but it's his truth, right? Doesn't make him happy, but at least he knows. Yeah. And there's a very sort of another very Greek view you get in Sophocles, which is call no man happy until he is dead, which I like, which seems, and what the Greeks seem to have meant by that is that happiness is something that you cannot attribute to your life. It's something attributed by other people to your life. Yeah. So happiness then is the sum of stories that can be told about you after you're dead.
Yes, but you don't actually experience it yourself.
You don't experience it yourself. It's what the Greeks call glory, right? That you can, in a sense, you just hope you're not going to fuck up.
You create a great narrative.
Right, and you're not going to screw it up. And then you die, and then people tell nice stories. And that's
I think a lot of people live like that.
Okay.
That's why, now that you say that, I would say that probably that's true to a lot. I think a lot of people probably live their life not concerned with their own happiness, but the story they're creating.
Right.
I think that's probably very true. That's definitely not me.
Okay.
No, but meaning it I hear you say that because I think I could see how people I've known, or I could see how that could be, and probably parts of my life. But I do think and go, no, that's a great thing that you pick truth, and I think because like you said with the coffee, you sit. I mean, watching Ivanov the other day. I mean, really, there was moments of pure pleasure of such reflection, as if it was being done for me. That amazing thing that happens in the theater once in a great while, where you're sitting there going, they're doing this just for me. No one else gets it. Yeah. I do, and you can't believe it, and you're like and that's not true. Obviously, it means everybody is, and it's so, and there's such a, but I really don't trust it. I really don't. I don't think I trust that's enough, and that something else creeps in. It's like, what's the truth of this? Right. How can this last? It can't just be about pleasure. It can't just be about. And it does go right by you. And I think Paul's films deal a lot with that. Yeah. With not being content with just being, and that it's a struggle to just be, but how impossible that is because of all the things we're talking about right now. And he'll overload his films in a way with it, where it's just, I think that's Paul. I think he's an overloaded individual. Makes him such an amazing person. He's just, what's happening in his head is way too much for any person to bear. And you kind of see him and you get to know him like that. And you see his films do that too. But it is in search of, how can I just be?
Right.
You know, I mean, and I think that it would be the idea of happiness.
I can't think of. I mean, for me, it's the most interesting direct. I mean, I
think so too.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Let's talk about The Master briefly, because there's a scene. I saw it in London last week, 2 weeks ago, and made some notes in the pub afterwards. This is what I wrote down, because the film ends with this scene with the Joaquin Phoenix character, where he's having sex with this English woman.
Yeah.
And he asks her the questions that the master asks him earlier on. What is your name? What is your name? Mm-hmm. And then it ends with,
do you think this is your only life? Or life, something like that.
Yeah. And then, and you are the brave, he says to her, you are the bravest girl I've ever met, or the most courageous girl. And you say exactly that your character says the same thing to Joaquin Phoenix. And there's this moment in the last interchange between the Lancaster Dodd character and the Fred Quill character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right. The master's final words to him are stay or go. But if you go, see if you can live without a master. Right? See if
you can live without a master, and also that I will in the next life I will hunt you. I will basically kill you.
Right.
That's it. He really. I mean, it's like if I see you again, it will be in war.
Yeah.
Which is really something else.
So can we live without a master?
Yeah,
I guess that's the question which that movie raises. I don't know what sort of question that is in a way. But can we live without a master? And
I think it does. Yeah, I think it raises a question. I think the answer is in the character Freddie Quill. Mm-hmm. And that's why I, as Lancaster Dodd, am so fascinated by him, because I think he is living without a master, and therefore his life is hell. Do you know what I mean? Meaning that he's tormented, because there is nothing he will actually be led by, except his inner. Like you say, it's outside you, right? It's inside him. Something is just, whether it's sex or drugs or alcohol or food or wake or sleep.
It's a very drunken film as well.
It's just all, it's all text, it's all feeling and emotion and pleasure and not pleasure and he like an animal, and that gets down to me actually calling him one. Mm-hmm. But I think that and this is the thing that everyone gets wrapped up into when they talk about this, like, is it a homoerotic film and all these things? And I'm like, no. Well, you can do whatever you want with it, but it's just a relationship. And obviously these two men see something in each other that they can't understand why the other one has. Yeah. And so they kind of, you know what I mean? When you find somebody, you're like, why do they have that? Why are they like that? Mm-hmm. Why can't I be like that? Why am I that? And these two meet each other, and it's like they just sniff the other person. It's like, that's incredible. How do we just kind of become one person? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So we can be perfect. Or be whatever, And I do think that that's obsession.
And they roll on the floor.
They get obsessed with it. Yeah, they roll. That's what all that
amazing
stuff is.
Scene.
Which is we never talked about any of this. What I'm saying right now, this is all just obviously in Paul allowing very deep, complicated questions to make themselves known through strong narrative. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens with a very bright mind. Is that things will come out of that strong narrative that won't necessarily be named. But now I look back on it, and I remember, because I remember when Paul fell in love with this woman once, and I was probably in my 20s, and he came to visit me, and I was on West 4th. I lived on West 4th and Jane, and I lived right across from the corner bistro there, Now there's a chocolate place, but it used to be a deli, and I lived right above that. It was this crappy, like one bedroom, but it was perfect and wonderful. And he fell in love, and he came to visit me. We went across the street to the Jane Street Tavern. Mm-hmm. And it was the middle of the day, and he was with the girl he was in love with. He'd just fallen. And I remember he was so happy that he started tackling me. And we do this. We've done this 50 times in our relationship. But we were beating on each other so fiercely because he was so happy, and he was happy, Mm-hmm. And he was beating on me, and I'm stronger than he is, I'm a thick guy, you know, and he's a bit taller, but I can kind of, but he's so determined, and we almost got kicked out of there. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We hadn't had a drink, and it was so few tables were turning over, and that's not even an exaggeration. And that's that. And I remember when we were shooting that. I remember him saying something at the age. He's like, "Why'd you go and like don't tell him?" But I knew exactly what he meant from our history. You know, it's just such a beautiful thing in art that you have this history that doesn't have to be named, and it's something, and it kind of works. So I watch that, and it's me and Paul, you know, and it's Paul being in love, and so that's that moment.
Yeah.
It's like I'm in love, he's in love, and now we're going to play around on the ground, you know, and it has nothing to do with wanting to have sex or anything. It has to do with love, you know, and in that moment there is happiness for both of them, but it's so short-lived because they can't actually come together. They can't be one. And so, you know, now that I think back on it, Lancaster's saying to him at the end, it's like, if I see you again, I have to kill you because seeing you is way too painful.
He's a kind of double. He's a kind of weird
it really is
compliment. And but that's also bound up with this question of the past, because you know the way in which the master's techniques work, there's processing, which throws up past life, regression to past lives. There's a trauma. Then you get some weird stuff about things from other places which have deformed us. We're deformed, right? We're deformed. And by identifying the point in the past where we were deformed, we can become perfect again. Right? That's the kind of structure, which is a structure. It's also one way of thinking about happiness. It's this desire for perfection, right? Maybe it's that. That is what the master promises. Whether he actually believes it himself, I don't know. In a sense, it's complicated. And what he finds in the Fred Quill character is something that he's not, something deformed and bestial about him.
But that he's also drawn to because
absolutely.
Because I do think that he is a slave to something, the master himself. He's a slave to this thing he's created.
The cause.
The cause. Which is, and everyone wants to say, well, it's a cult. And I'm like, well, I never really thought it. I thought about it as any kind of movement that works through our culture, especially in this country. You know, you could call it anything. It's not Scientology. I think we've proven that much by now. That it's based on things of Scientology, but ultimately it's this piece of fiction, you know, and that he's a slave to this thing he's created, which is so much like life. We become slaves to the life we create. I do believe that. And it's like, and then we try to spend our lives trying to get away from it, or change it, or break it down somehow. And I think it's a little bit what I was talking about earlier with reaching the mid-40 kind of whatever, and there you are. But I think that he is, and so he sees in Freddie Quell, wow. And it's a mixture of I need to tame that because I can't bear to look at it because it's too pleasurable, but I also want to be a part of it. I think he really wants to be it. And I think that was my thing playing the guy. I think he so desperately wants to be Freddie, you know, but how can I be Freddie? Freddie's an animal. Freddie's supposed to be judged and criticized and fixed. But I so badly want to be him because that lives inside him. And you see it in the film very well. I think Paul does it very smart. You know, the drinking, talks about the drinking and how he drank it all, for the poison mixture, which is this awful thing that he makes. But he drinks all of it because he wants to get that high, wants to feel that way. And then you see him dancing with the women. Right. You know what I mean? And you know that it's like, and there's a scene that was left out but the scene that he has with his wife, you know, in the bathroom, you know, where she's jerking him off, you know, like saying, don't think that you're that. Yeah. Because she sees Freddie come in and go, oh, I know you're Freddie. I know you got a little Freddie in you, but you're not going there. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And it's like, so we're going to have it out here in the bathroom a little bit. We're going to have to fix it. Like she thinks that's going to fix it. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's not. It's never going away. Freddie will never not be the love of this man's life because it is the person that he needs, and vice versa. So Freddie will probably die very quickly. That's what I always visioned. That for the guy without the master is going to go and die somewhere, you know, while the master lives on to a ripe old age, miserable that Freddie's not there, you know. But I do think when the idea of the teachings he brings up, that what do they do? I think it's him trying somehow to to create eternity. I think I think that's what it is when somebody leads a movement like that. Is that they're trying to leave their mark so definitively on the world that they live on forever, no matter what.
Yeah.
Which is the narrative story.
It's a very American story about religion. I think the Scientology thing is a red herring, and I wish people, it's a structure which you can find in Mormonism, in all sorts of religious enthusiasms in the 19th century in particular, where there's a sense in which the world is hard, it's difficult, and that we're somehow twisted, and we need to be made whole. We need to be made perfect. Yeah. And once that structure's in place, then any form of religion can kick in at that point. So the master. Now, okay, I had a question, which is more of a sensible, proper question, which I wrote down somewhere, which is, I was watching an interview with you, which was, yes, we're meant to talk about depictions of unhappiness in movies and all the rest, which you have depicted many unhappy characters in many of the films that you've done splendidly well. And actually to think about the movie Happiness as well. I don't know if people have seen the movie Happiness, but I have the DVD in my bag if anyone wants to borrow it afterwards. It's great. I'll just watch the final scene again, which is with, anyway, needn't go into it. But you say somewhere in an interview with a very posh English lady, BAFTA, the task of an actor is to defend everyone you play. The task is to defend everyone you play. And to defend someone, you've got to show them at their worst, at their ugliest, at their most twisted. Yeah. So let's think about that in relationship to, well, anything you like, really. Sure. But maybe the Happiness film, but anything you like. But it seems that in one way of looking at that movie, Happiness, is that, is it's a kind of cynical film. One way of looking at it, you could say this is a kind of cynical, poking fun at, I don't know, people living in in New Jersey or whatever.
The deformed of the world, really.
Another way of looking at it is, and the way I'd look at it is it's a kind of moralist film in the proper sort of 17th, 16th, 17th, something like Montaigne or La Rochefoucauld, these people, or even Nietzsche, a kind of moralist's eye who's looking at the foibles and ridiculousness of life, solitude, pain, all the rest, not with some higher sense of, it's not cynical. It's there's something very humane about that film in its unrelentingness, right? So. Why do we enjoy watching, if we're so keen on being happy, why do we spend so much time in the dark watching actors as brilliant as you portraying miserable creatures? Why is that?
Oh, well,
what's going on there?
I think it's like it's reading a great book too. I mean, any great novel that I can think of is actually drawing a character or a narrative in such a way that is so brutally honest, in a way that you thought, oh God, I never would have put it that way, but that's it. When you're living your life, and all of a sudden you come across it in a book in such a way that you're relieved that somebody actually got it down on paper, and you're grateful because it is that awful or that brutal. And I always say it's therefore that memorable, and that's why it's in a book, or part of something. And I think that's really what you're what I think what you're saying, or maybe I was saying when I answered those questions is that, I will relate it to the master in a way too, because the master is the kind of character that people go in judging already from the get-go. Yeah. Oh, this is a guy that's based on this. It's a head of a cult. He's there, all these things, and so like it's dangerous to kind of go too ugly. Because it's going to be too easy for somebody to see, there it is. There's the crazy cult guy, And I remember thinking that, so I had to really earn it. You know what I mean? I had to earn it. So when it happened, it had to mean something. And so there's moments that happens, but the one moment in particular is when I call that guy a cunt. I don't remember that guy at the party, when he starts. But that guy is. That guy is. He is. Yeah. No, and I mean it. Think about it. Think about if you're at some place
and you're
talking about something you spent your whole life on, and you think, and you're carrying it around like as if I let go of this, that this is my This is my living after I die thing that I'm carrying around with me. And some guy who I don't even know, who doesn't know me, reads some stuff, comes into a party, and starts to dismantle it in front of other people. If it was something like that, you would start to feel that enraged too, because you would think, why, oh why, oh why would you do this to me? Mm-hmm. I would. And I remember thinking that, like, so you put it into a character like that, and all of a sudden, it allows to, you know, for somebody to either go, there's the crazy cult guy, or for somebody to go, I know him.
Right.
I know him. I know him. Why would I ever think that way about him? Why did I have that thought about him before I came into this movie? Mm-hmm. Why would I think that I'm different from that guy? I know I am, but why would I think I'm so different in the human race? And that's what I'm talking about, is if I don't allow people to somehow identify with the worst inside themselves, they never have a chance at actually walking out with that person in their heart, you know, or in their minds. You know what I mean? They're too easy to dismiss. Mm-hmm. It's like, it might not be the thing they'll admit to a friend, you know what I mean? Or admit to anybody afterwards, like, well, that Lancaster died when he freaked out. I kind of understood that.
That's right.
You know what I mean? But it's like, but if you're honest, you kind of probably do. Mm-hmm. You know, I do. And I know I can't be that wildly different from everyone in this room, you know what I mean? And it's like, and I identify with a lot of things I've done in the movies. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I've literally done them. It's I identify with them. I identify with their source. You know, and that's what I mean. And I think it's really hard to, and I think that's in the great tragedies, people can get away with it better because they're classics. Right. And people have revered them already. Right. So in like Shakespeare's, you know, you can kill people and do all these things and still be moved by them. You know, but it's Shakespeare, so therefore we can do it. But in modern things like happiness and stuff, it's too easy. And I think that's what's great about happiness, is that it's loaded up with these characters that I think ultimately you're just supposed to be, your heart's supposed to be bleeding for all of them, I think. Right. I watching that movie, it's awful. It's just like they are struggling so hard just to get through the goddamn day. And he's drawn them in such a way that it makes sense, it's not illogical. And that this kid at the end of the movie would have he's masturbating. I came. And I swear to God, it's like, I always go like, that's fucking brilliant. I mean, because that is happiness. It is. The kid is happy. I'm thinking back like, Dad, you know, that's right. Amongst this turmoil and all this incest and crazy shit that these kids like, I have a penis and it works and here I am. Right. And then what? And it's life, you know, right to the roof, you know? And it's just, I think it's just one of those moments of joy, actually. And I think that's a rare movie for it. You're not going to find many movies that get to joy that way. You know? But he does. He does, I think. He succeeds. You know, but that's... And then the dog licks the dog's happy too. And then, no, but it's true. And then the dog licks the wife of the... it's a great cycle. Yeah, but I think, and then there's humor. And then that's the other thing. It's like, then you're laughing. And that feels good. I mean, really, there's something, he's done something in that movie. I remember the times I haven't watched it in years. I remember watching it the first time and thinking like, wow, he really did it. Because I knew that was the goal ultimately. But he really did do it, I think. And I think it is because he actually showed them the way they were supposed to be shown. And if he'd done it halfway or kind of way, it would have been more sleazy. Or more cheesy or more something, but actually it was more human. But what's it mean to earn it like that with a character? I mean, because it seems I watched Synecdoche in New York yesterday afternoon, and it's a hard film. That's a tough one. It's a hard film, and it's all about the brutal truth, right? That's the obsession, the brutal truth. Well, it's going to be real. It's going to be real. This is a lie. It's a lie. It's so awful. And he builds it and it reenacts it, and it's a lie. You know, we get the complications of layering, of everything's a reenactment. The director has got the director in his ear being played by another director, and then the last line of the movie is die. You know, it is tough. It's so awful. Yeah. When he does it, die, and then he dies. And the thing is, but the thing is, it reminds me of Ivanov. Actually, he is like that, and it is very hard to watch. It's very hard. It was very hard to act and live in. Yeah. But I did not identify somehow, and I think that is my job, and I think it probably is your job in a way that to really sit there with those things, and to not let yourself off the hook, And to not go oh, well, I don't really understand it, so forget it. I mean, you know, in life, a lot of people are just like, I don't understand it. I forget, you know, and it's like, and I want to do that too, but I can't if I'm going to do what I do well, you know. And I think that is, in that movie, you really are. It's like, no, he just won't say, okay, that's okay. I mean, it sounds as that's good enough. That's close. Let's just go out to dinner. I mean, he really can't let himself even do that. I mean, even in the sex scenes, every scene is just tormented with this thing of like,
we've been rehearsing for 17 years.
It's like it's not working. Something's not working. And I remember like I would ask Charlie, who I think is one of the great minds that we have too, artistic minds, and saying, well, what, you know, what? And he said, he goes, well, maybe. And he would always say it as if he didn't know either, which I just loved, because I do think he didn't, you know. And so I was leaving it up to me to keep searching like that. And he'd say, well, maybe he's just doing everything to get back his wife, you know, Catherine Keener, who leaves, you know. And this whole journey is that if you could somehow get it right and get this perfectly brilliant piece of art that actually mirrors life so perfectly, and that everyone who saw it just was like in awe that his wife would come back. You know, that his wife, that he has put his wife in such a place where his wife is that great an artist. She is that perfect. You know, in his mind's eye, when he thinks of her, he sees perfection in her art and in her. And
Whose name is Lack, strangely.
Lack, yeah. Lack, yeah, that's right.
Adele Lack.
My God, yes, that's right. Very good. I would never remember that. That's so good. But I do think that, and he said that, and that was the thing I keyed into the most, because I do think, you know, that love that's just not requited, it's just not sated somehow, sticks with you a long time, and you do things way beyond whatever you thought you'd do. And so I did think of that a lot. But that movie it's unrelenting in its pursuit of whatever it is that he thinks is somehow going to fix it. You know?
It's another moment which is sort of, you know, different, which is again, I mean, for me, I remember the first time I saw it, and it just sort of, you know, there was a moment of unintelligibility, incomprehension, and then being sort of lifted up. That moment in Magnolia when the Amy Mann song "Wise Up" kicks in, you know, and suddenly you've got all the different strands of the narrative are connected around a song. Right? It's this moment of transcendence of some kind of being. It's extraordinary that it just switches over into a register of song, which is, you know, I guess we earned that in a certain way in watching that film.
What's that? We're not, you know, we're connected. You know, it's him making it very literal, and I think it bothered some people actually at the time. I remember I would get a lot of criticism, but I thought it was just a stroke of genius. That it was like he was just making it literal, and everyone thought it was like, oh, everyone starts singing like in this other film I did, where everyone started singing this Elton John song about this film I did about a rock band, Cameron Crowe. I can't remember the title. Yeah, almost famous. Everyone starts singing on the bus that song, and everyone would be like, yeah, that's like that scene. I'm like, it's nothing like that. What are you talking about? It's nothing. That's a scene of a bunch of people being nostalgic. This isn't a scene about nostalgia. This is actually, these guys are actually consciously touching each other across, you know, like I don't know you, but you're over there, and I'm singing a song, but right now we're actually in communion. That's what he's doing. He's saying that all these characters in that moment are feeling for each other, because they all in that moment understand each other, right? And are identifying and are feeling and have empathy, and I think Paul's saying that he believes that happens, you know, and I think that that's a very, you know, powerful thing. I think that he does a lot of those things in that movie. You know, with the frog, he really does go to a very metaphysical kind of spiritual plane a lot in that movie, which I think is really beautiful. Yeah, fantastic. That's fantastic. Does you have anything else intelligent to say here? Just talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Yeah. No, that's about. Well, I said that to you at the beginning because when I started looking at Simon's book, which is really wonderful, and I was sitting there thinking about what philosophy is, and I know this must be what you think, you know, talking about in your first class or something, but the learning how to die
Yeah.
You know, and therefore is learning how to live. And I think that is something that Montaigne, I'm going to say his name all
Yes.
along, but that he says, and that his
Yes.
kind of philosophy throughout, and that why he did what he did by keeping those journals and everything through time and those entries and I always it's just learning how to die. So learning how to die is learning how to live because you're dying. Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Or
think
you know what I
so.
mean? But you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah, I know
it
what
seems
you're saying.
so obvious. But I always think, like, is it something else? Is it, is it actually coming right up and saying? Because that's the thing with meditation too, right? That meditation, that if you meditate every day and you really get into meditation is actually coming right up to the lip of death and saying, I'm here, I'm scared. I'm here. I'm sure that's life. That if you can actually live in that place, that's where right. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right? I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's the idea that we live in a sort of counterfeit eternity, and I mean, philosophy begins with a drama, the drama of Socrates' death, which is written in as dramatic a form as the Greek tragedies that precede it, or going on around it. And Socrates is condemned to death or exile. He could leave, but he decides that he'll drink the poison and expire with his disciples around him. And then it's at that point that he begins to talk about the philosophy. The philosopher is half dead, right? The philosopher is already is the person who has an acute consciousness of their moment, their finitude, and doesn't flee or evade that, but finds some affirmation in relationship to it. And then he takes the poison and dies while spinning out these stories about the immortality of the soul, which you're never sure whether he really believes or not. And there's been a certain, tradition in philosophy of that idea of the tranquil death, right? Of dying in a. Now, I mean, at one level, I think it's fantastically important because we live in a culture that denies death and flees death, and is therefore constantly shocked by it because we keep it at the edges all the time. We don't have the rituals. We don't know what to do. We're confused by death, and death is for us somehow obscene. We need to shove it somewhere else. Whereas there's another tradition which, in philosophy, in the Christian saints, in all over all these different figures, where that's what you keep your mind on. You see the skull beneath the skin, as Eliot said of Webster. You see that and Montaigne talks about the practice of the Egyptians when they bring a skeleton into the banqueting hall, and they say, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for soon you're going to look like this."
That's right. And
Which would be great in Manhattan restaurants. I think
that would be great.
You could do. Maybe some of my students could do that. You just take skeletons round and say, "Look, it's going to be like this. You're going to die. So enjoy it."
That's right. But that
because it's going to go very soon.
I heard someone sent me this sermon actually, this Christian sermon. That was yesterday. Someone sent it 12-minute long. It was really nice, actually, and it was pertaining to what happened in the school, with the children and the shooting, but ultimately he was talking about that. But he brought that up, that the idea that Christians look at this cross all the time, and it was really, I thought, really wonderful. But he just said what you just said. But the idea that what Christianity, the Christians, we look at this cross, which is basically death and grieving, and we're told to rejoice. And he was saying, I don't know how that's possible right now. But that is what that is, and there is and I thought that was a very helpful thing to say to a bunch of people. Actually, it's like that is a really smart thing to say at a time like that.
Do you want to talk about the New Testament? Have you got any? Do you want to? I don't know. It seems silly not to talk about what happened.
Oh well, I mean, I did. That's
I've been thinking
I don't know if I had given. I think I just was feeling a lot, and then there was so many people around me, other parents, and they would start saying things. But then this woman sent me this sermon, which I thought was just she obviously wanted to go to church about it, and there wasn't somebody put it into words. And I thought that was a very smart thing to start to think about, that to look at death and rejoice. And what does that mean? Because obviously you don't want to rejoice. So what is that? And to get caught up in that thought, I thought was really something to go, a place to go.
Yeah.
You know, because there is really no understanding. There isn't a way to put this into words or meaning or anything, but to think about it in that context, I do think is something that we're uncomfortable with. But I did help me.
Right.
You know, because right after that, I did go home to my kids, and I did make them dinner, you know, and I was home with them, and I wasn't thinking about what happened when I was around them. It's when I'm not with them, and then I start to think about it. And he also talked about the fact that we can't protect our children, and he kept repeating it as if it was it was eating at him, like truly as a person, that he was actually saying that what the truth is that we can't protect our children. And he actually raised his voice when he said it, because he obviously has kids. And he's just saying, we can't protect our children. And he kept saying it over and over again, like he was almost going to start crying or something, but he didn't. Yeah. You know, and it was because it drove, I could tell it bothered him that was the truth that he had come to. But that was the truth, you know. And that moved me greatly, too. I thought that was very helpful.